Assalamu alaikum. In the most holy name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, I bear witness there is no God but Allah. I bear witness that Allah came to us in the person of Master Farrakhan Muhammad, to whom all praise is forever due. I bear witness that Master Farrakhan Muhammad raised from among us the descendants of slaves here in America, his exalted Christ, his Mahdi, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. And I am forever grateful to them both for their mercy in our midst, their messenger Messiah, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And in those names, I greet my beloved brothers and sisters in the words of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Beloved, it is such an incredible honor to be able to participate in this commemoration of the rebuilding of the Nation of Islam, 1110 Eastern Parkway, under the leadership of one of the most incredible and amazing human beings I have ever had the privilege, honor to be under his tutelage. And I'm speaking of Minister Abdul Karim Muhammad, at that time, Brother Linward X. I will never forget the first time I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan speak at the school of, I think it was a school of music and art on the Upper West Side in New York. And this was in late 1981. I may be somewhat off on my timeline because this was really a long time ago. And it just makes me pause to say how grateful I am, not only to be alive, but to still be in the circle and the community of the faithful. But I will never forget because, as most of you know, I was on chemotherapy for cancer at the time. And I came out with Sister Barbara and Brother Larry to hear the minister. And at the end of his message, he brought out this young man and said, this is my minister here in New York, Linward X. And we were directed, those of us in the audience who wanted to hear more of the teachings, we were directed to the Harlem State Office building on Sunday on 125th Street. And that is where we were meeting at that time. And not too long of a time, we were able to lease a place in Brooklyn, New York. And that, of course, is the legendary 1110 Eastern Parkway. I cannot think of anyone whose leadership I would have wanted to come into this fold under, besides Brother Minister Abdul Karim Muhammad. And the reason I say this is I didn't know it then because I was just basking in the light of his strength and enthusiasm. But I would say that he is the balance between the spiritual and the military. A man with a great spiritual depth, but with the force, the fight, the power that attracted me to Islam in the beginning. Because what drew me to this, and after hearing the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I was in that night. After being drawn into this, I stayed here because the nation's program on the back of the Final Call newspaper, which had not officially come out at the time that I first accepted Islam. But when the minister brought back our newspaper and named it The Final Call, he put the Muslim program on the back of the paper as it had been on the back page of Muhammad Speaks. And it is what is on that back page that I have devoted my life to, particularly under What the Muslims Want, number 4, and under What the Muslims Believe, number 12. And it is Minister Abdul Kareem Muhammad who oriented all of us to that type of strength. When you came in the Brooklyn Mosque, there was nothing equivocal about our love and our dedication and our willingness to fight and even die, if necessary, to protect what belonged to us. And when I say what belonged to us, it was nothing physical because we didn't have anything material. But what we had was the truth. And we still have it to this day because of those soldiers who stood back at that time. I remember a young Abdul Hafiz Muhammad, who at that time was coming up out of the 5% nation. And I want to say to Sister Lorraine and to the family that when Minister Farrakhan delivered the criterion, July 4th, 2020, and he credited our brother with being the inspiration for that message. And that message will go down in history as the day that Allah, God, drew the line in the sand of demarcation with Allah versus Satan. From that day, it has been on, and we are moving quicker and faster toward that final conflict. But it was our brother out of number 7 whose work, and though his life was lost in the early days of this final conflict, physically, as we know from the Holy Quran, those whose lives are lost and given in the way of Allah, as the Holy Quran said, nay, they are not dead, but you perceive not. And that's nothing spooky. But if we're going to escape death, the only way to do that is to align our mind and our actions with that of Allah in the person of Master Farid Muhammad, and to come into these teachings and be taught by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. I remember us listening over hookup. That's what we called it back then. Sitting in the mosque and listening over a landline to Minister Farrakhan teach a message. And then on those Sundays, when Minister Abdul Kareem Muhammad gave the lecture, with that fist he would beat into his hand and always referred to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as beloved. And I remember when the minister was coming back and forth to the East Coast and to Brooklyn and up and down the East Coast, building a nation, lifting up the name of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad after the enemies and the hypocrites had destroyed his reputation. But you can ruin a man's reputation because your reputation is how people see you, but your character is who you really are. So you couldn't touch his character. You can't touch the character of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And he worked, and we worked with him. And now the world has to recognize the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and his teaching is now beginning to take over this earth, a new world coming in, and an old, rebellious, hateful, contemptuous world going out. I am thankful to Allah that I can be here with you. Oh my God, I wouldn't trade those early days for anything in the world. When we used to follow our minister from place to place, we didn't worry about whether we had gas in the car. A bunch of us would jump in somebody's car and ride up and down the East Coast. And so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. May Allah bless us all with love and the light of understanding. Love you much. Assalamu alaikum.